Welcome to the Rising Up Post Show on FoxLA.com. On tonight's episode of Rising Up, voices in the debate over police reform, from community policing to body cameras, calls to defund, even abolish law enforcement. The death of George Floyd and the protests were 1 year ago this week. So we continue the conversation each night with new guests. So please welcome my two guests now. We have Commander Ruby Flores, a 27-year veteran of the LAPD. Now, you have a title, a new office. Talk about that real quick, Commander.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, so I'm the department's first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, really to look at what this police reform is supposed to look like internally and externally, working with the community that we serve.
All right, thank you for being with us. Also, my first time meeting you, sir, from the Riverside Sheriff's Department, Chad Bianco. You've also been with your department for 27 years. Just run down all the different areas you've worked in policing.
I've worked everything that we have to offer almost here. I started in corrections. I've worked an obviously patrol assignment. I've been involved with gangs and drugs in that realm. I've worked our internal affairs division, our civil bureau, our administrative bureau. I've had administrative assignments in corrections, planning, in administration. So I've been at contract cities, very large contract cities for our department, and small contract cities and county areas. So for what we have to offer here in a large agency, I'm pretty well rounded, I hope.
Done it all. So. All right. Well, we saw you in our series, so I'll just stay with you, Sheriff, if you can. Tell me, after watching this episode, and I don't know if you've seen all 4 of them so far, we've got another tomorrow, your thoughts on reliving the protests?
You know, it's definitely, it brings back emotions for sure. It brings back a time where of certain uncertainty. And that's one thing that we were certain of, is we had absolutely no idea what to expect, what was going to happen. And you know, the feeling at those times, the emotions that were going on is something that, you know, you kind of have forgotten about until you watch these, and then it obviously it brings it right back. So it's been a year of this and of these types of conversations, and obviously it's going to continue for some time. And really, that's what is supposed to be happening. I think the difference between now and the past is it's stopped in the past, and hopefully that's not the case this time.
Well, I think for all of us who covered this, even myself, it's been very emotional to sit and soak it in. Commander Flores, where were you during the protests? What was your duty?
Yes, so I was assigned to training group, and so I remember the time when we were mobilized, and I was called to respond to our department operations center. And just driving in, I got kind of caught up in a spontaneous protest, and I remember thinking and telling my family the next day that this was much different than any other time before. I mean, I really can't describe the level of tension and emotion that was in the air, just, you know, while I'm responding. So I have a lot of empathy for everybody that was involved, not just those that were protesting, but really our officers were really met with a different time, because we in Los Angeles, as you know, we frequently have protests and demonstrations with thousands of people without incident for years. And so we have made a lot of progress, but this time it was much different. You could feel it in the air, and that sense of uncertainty, I could certainly agree with. That was really the unpredictability of the whole situation. The emotion behind it made it difficult to manage.
Commander, I'll stay with you for a minute. Anytime you watch a documentary in depth with so much file footage that has gone into it and so much sound, we had 28 different interviews on this, everything from reporters to law enforcement to BLM to protesters. What's it like to sit back and take a look at that?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of different historical incidents that have happened in LA that have caused us to reflect where we are as an organization and the state of policing. And I think over the last 150 years of our department, I can proudly say that we are a learning organization, and we have made tremendous strides over the years. At the same time, it really brought to light that it's no surprise that law enforcement is really the flashpoint for societal change, as being one of the most visible governmental agencies. So there's an opportunity for us to really create positive change and really look at this time of crisis, so to speak, and look for the opportunities to continue to improve our relationship with the community and just reflect at how we can be better.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Sheriff Bianco, let me ask you this question. So the death of George Floyd happened in Minneapolis. The first protests were in LA. Did you imagine at all that they'd come to your community as well, Riverside?
I think we expected it. We didn't know the level to expect, but as we obviously were paying attention to what was going on around us and with social media and the accounts that were being shown on TV, we knew that it was coming, and there were even some scheduled events that were in our county. So yes, we did. We had no idea what to expect when they got here, but we were, I will say, we weren't prepared initially for what happened that day, but luckily enough, we did have enough time, probably about 6-8 hours, where we did bring enough resources in that we definitely were prepared for it in the end. But we were luckily we had LA to look for and to look to see what was happening there. And we got to watch on TV and talk with my colleagues there and see what they were doing, what they were experiencing. And we actually had a good warning from LAPD that the people that they were arresting that weekend were overhearing conversations that, don't forget, it's coming to Riverside on Monday. So we did have that little bit of a heads up.
Right. We were getting word of that, too, where different movements and protests and looting even was planned. Let's stand by to my panel right here. We're going to talk about a setup here for those that are just joining us. It's now about 6:30. We want to welcome any viewers who perhaps were watching on TV and are now just joining us. With the death of George Floyd, protests in LA started taking shape on this day 1 year ago. It's when the first protest in LA hit. So for the past 4 nights, Fox LA has aired a documentary. Tonight's episode of Rising Up looked at the debate over police reform. Take a look.
When I took on this job as a police officer, I took it because I wanted to be a servant. I wanted to be able to serve others. And so when I looked at it from a spiritual lens, it really made it easy for me to take a knee at one of the protests, because for me, it was my outward expression of showing the community that I'm here to serve you and I'm here to put you before myself.
It's not enough to say Black Lives Matter. We have to make Black Lives Matter.
Every civilized society has law enforcement. They protect us at 2 and 3 in the morning. And talking about eliminating the police department, having a mayor talking about defunding the police.
So we're our own worst critic. But as we're doing that criticism, let's make sure that as America, we're not taking the scapegoat mentality that if we fix policing, we'll fix America. What we need to do in fixing this country is much more complex.
We welcome back our guests on tonight's panel, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco and LAPD Commander Ruby Flores. Commander, I'll start with you. The word defund the police, for some people that was the first time they'd heard it. Where do we stand with that concept, do you think, right now?
That is probably the extreme thought of what law enforcement police reform should look like or be. I think that over time, people are understanding or realizing with the rise of crime that we have to be able to work together, and we need the police. But I think from a law enforcement standpoint, I think it's important that we understand why that is even a topic of discussion. Why is it that people even want to abolish the police? We may not agree with it, and there is always room for improvement, but I think the first step would be to at least begin to see eye to eye and understand why someone even has that mindset to abolish the police.
Well, I think what I've learned over time is that it means different things to different people. The concept of reimagining policing. Some want to shift some money to social services, and then of course you have some who call for, as you say, to abolish police. So Sheriff, I'll ask you your opinion. A year now into this, where do you think we stand with that concept of defunding police and what you're hearing from your citizens?
You know, I won't be as maybe I don't know if professional is the word as the commander, but that is defunding the police is the most absolutely ridiculous thing that anybody could ever come up with. And that is what started it. And it went for probably a week or so, a couple of weeks. And then all people with common sense said that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So it started changing into reimagining, and they changed the words a little around and said that, well, that's not what we meant. We want to shift money and put it into social programs. And whether you shift money or whatever you want to call it, it's doing away with the police. And that is absolutely ridiculous. It is the worst idea that anyone can ever imagine. Mr. Terrell said that earlier, and it's a fact. We cannot defund the police. The fact of the police is that predominantly the people that we are coming out to protect our victims are of color. It's our Black communities. It's our Hispanic communities. So this whole notion of racism and defund the police because we're racist it's a false narrative. And the reason why they have to change the words of this defund the police is because it was a bad idea, because it didn't work out for them, and society as a whole stood up and said, no, that's a crazy idea. That's not what we do. And it's evolving. So I don't believe there is any legitimate
I just want to jump in because, if you go back and look at the series, or if you talk to Black Lives Matter LA, for example, their call is to abolish the police, start from scratch. But let me ask you then, so what is your department doing to create change?
I don't know if creating change is the right way to phrase it. I think that we historically in law enforcement have been our own worst enemies in that we are not engaging enough with the public, and then we are not showing them that we are actually doing things that they're demanding of us, that we've actually been doing that already. And I think that that you guys have done a fantastic job in this series so far this week. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's episode, but I think there still is one part that's being left out, and Chief Moore alluded to it a little bit, that fixing the police, or this big push to, we have to reform the police and change the police, and that's going to be the fix of all our problems. There's a major part that's being left out of this whole argument, and that's the part of the criminality. And the criminality aspect of why we're even called into these situations and where society is going as a whole, we're not really addressing that. Within this, we're justifying a little bit, and I think that's the wrong way to go. I don't think the majority of the population is looking for us to justify anything. They all think that this is wrong.
I want to get the commander's response to this, and we had 28 voices in that documentary. And I've had the luxury of getting to do more voices with this chat here. And every time I watch the series, I think of 28 more voices I'd like to have on to talk about this. So, Commander, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so, there are many viewpoints on this for sure. We do know that we do serve the community, so it is our obligation to understand where they're coming from. I do believe that to the sheriff's point, though, is that we have been doing this for many, many years. We were under a consent decree. We have really been a leader in law enforcement for many to look at and emulate. But for some reason, either we're not talking about it enough, people don't want to understand it, or recognize it, or we have not done enough. Those are the options out there. And that's part of police reform, and I think that the community needs to have that accountability and work with us, and also recognize that not all police departments are created equal. There's every department across the nation have different rules, different policies, but in California, we're governed by post. And we as a department have really made tremendous strides, even to exceed what some of the mandates were from the consent decree. So that's really what I would have to say. It's a joint effort between the community and us.
I do want to ask you about one change that you and I talked about on a panel that you and I had done, Commander, about a week or two ago, and that's about women in policing, and noting there was a time where women could only rise to the rank of sergeant, and here you are as a commander. Talk about the 30 by 30 campaign, which is nationwide.
Yes, it is. So it's the national movement is to hire 30% recruit officers that are women by the year 2030. There are certainly many studies out there. It's backed by NYU. So it's evidence-based, and there's studies out there that show that women make better, not better, but excellent police officers because it's been proven that we use less uses of force incidents, less complaints of excess use of force, but most importantly too, we have shown that we make a difference, and there's better outcomes for some of our crime victims, considering that over half of crime victims across the nation are in fact women. So we certainly, qualified women can make a difference. And we joined some large agencies across the nation, small agencies from NYPD, Houston PD, and others. So we were able to launch this pledge officially through the department, but also as president of our Los Angeles Women Police Officer and Associate organization. I'm proud to say that we are backing it and fully committed to the pledge as well.
So if it's 30% by the year 2030, where do we stand now nationwide? What are the numbers?
Nationwide, we are less than 12%. LAPD, we're about 18%, and we've hovered at that number for many, many years. So we're all in agreement that it's time that we do much more to boost those numbers and create some sustainability and retention for women to even exceed that 30%.
Mm-hmm. Sheriff Bianco of Riverside, do you want to talk about some programs within your department that you're working on?
It's similar to that. We're doing everything we possibly can to hire from our own community and keep the people in our community that we're trying to attract in our own community. So we kind of took our effort away from the outside of county recruitment, the outside of state recruitment, and we're really concentrating on recruiting specifically from our communities, of our Hispanic communities, our Black communities, and we want them to represent those communities. We want them to work in the communities. It's not something that we really have concentrated on before. We try and do that as we can, but that's what we want right now. And I guess if you talk about, why are we here and what are these, what are we talking about making police reform and how we're going to do it? I think that a lot of it comes with who we're hiring and how we're trying to hire, but we have to also realize that we're hiring from the human race. And, sometimes we don't know who we're getting until it's too late. And I want everyone to know that I will speak for all of the sheriffs in the state, and honestly, I'll speak with all the chiefs of police in the state, that what you're seeing in this week-long series that you're hosting here is we're doing everything we can to make these changes and get rid of these bad apples per se, and the ones that shouldn't be in law enforcement that are making us look bad, because we all know internal to law enforcement, bad cops make us look bad. So we can have as many good cops as we want, but that one is going to be blasted all over the media, and then what people see is that they brand that as to all of us.
Well, so I think one of the arguments is with critics is that a number of scenes are not caught on camera, and that's why the ones that are caught mean so much. But we're going to be out of time soon, so I wanted to give Commander Ruby Flores of the LAPD, give me a final thought, something that struck you or stood out to you or something that you want to leave our audience with.
With this episode that you're doing, this documentary, I do appreciate the fact that you have given us a voice as law enforcement officers. I think that was really the general consensus amongst many police officers, was that we didn't have a chance to not defend ourselves, but have a voice in this whole movement. And we found ourselves to be on the defensive end and really villainized for a lot of the work that was done in other cities. Yes, I agree that it does affect law enforcement. We all wear this badge and this uniform to protect. And when our badge is tarnished, regardless of where this officer works, it affects each and every one of us. And that was really hard as a law enforcement community to take. So I appreciate giving the opportunity to have a voice and be part of the conversation and talk about what change is needed.
Well, as I've said, we've had different guests every night. I'm going to, Sheriff, roll some video of the moment that you took a knee as we look at this. Give me in about just less than a minute, if you can, your thought on taking the knee and how you think about it today as we look at it. Go ahead, Sheriff.
As we're watching it, okay. You know, during this time, it was crazy. There was probably 20 minutes leading up to this, and I was having a great conversation with a couple of the gentlemen that were there that were organizing this. Obviously, he is one of them. We were talking about praying for everyone before it started. As we went down and we're trying to get the other officers, you know, my deputies behind me, the ones that wanted to pray, them that wanted to pray for a peaceful ending to this, and also as a continued healing and making this work for all of us. In the background, what you're not hearing is this is where there is a part of this movement that doesn't want this to end, that doesn't want peace between us. They didn't want us talking together. And it was the part that was saying, we will never kneel with murderers. They're back there screaming, you know, profanities, Bianco, will never kneel with murderers. And I mean, it's just, there's not, at that particular time, the emotions were flying too high. They were way too high and they were out of control.
All right.
And unfortunately, some of that momentum is still carrying that. I'm not sure if everybody involved in this solution wants it solved.
I do have to wrap it up with that thought. I want to thank you both for being with us. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco and LAPD Commander Ruby Flores. Thank you for your time. Obviously, a conversation that's going to continue for a long time in our communities. So I thank you.